I never thought a routine dental appointment would unravel the darkest chapter of my life. But when Dr. Rebecca Foster looked at my wife's x-rays that Tuesday morning, her expression shifted from professional calm to something I can only describe as controlled alarm. She excused herself, returned with the clinic manager, and 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a private office, being asked questions I never imagined I'd have to answer about the woman I'd shared my life with for 7 years. My name is Robert Chen. I'm 63 years old, recently retired from a career in civil engineering, and until that morning in October, I believed I knew everything about my wife, Diane. We'd met at a community fundraiser in Vancouver 8 years ago. I'd been a widower for 3 years by then, still navigating the hollow spaces my first wife Margaret's death had left in my home and heart. Margaret and I had built 32 years together before pancreatic cancer took her. Those 3 years alone had been long enough. When friends started suggesting I consider dating again, I'd resisted. How do you replace 3 decades of shared history, of knowing someone so completely that you could finish each other's sentences? Then I met Diane Ashford at that fundraiser. She was 51, elegant in a way that didn't try too hard, with auburn hair just starting to show distinguished streaks of silver. She was a financial consultant, she told me, recently relocated from Toronto after her own divorce. We talked for 2 hours that night about everything from urban planning to the best hiking trails in British Columbia. She had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. When she laughed at my terrible jokes about load-bearing walls, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: possibility. Our courtship was what I suppose people call whirlwind, though at our age it felt more like 2 people who knew what they wanted and didn't see the point in wasting time. We were engaged within 6 months and married a year after we met. My daughter Jessica, who was 34 at the time, had reservations. She'd flown in from Calgary for a weekend specifically to meet Diane. "Dad, don't you think this is kind of fast?" She'd asked me over coffee while Diane was out running errands. "Sweetheart, I'm 60. Fast is a luxury I can't afford," I'd replied. "Your mother would want me to be happy." Jessica had studied Diane carefully during that visit, asked polite but probing questions about her background, her career, her previous marriage. Diane had handled it gracefully, answering everything with just the right mix of openness and respect for Jessica's protective instincts. "She seems nice, Dad," Jessica had said before flying back to Calgary. "Just be careful, okay? 7 years isn't that long to be alone after 32 years with Mom." I dismissed her concerns as natural daughter worry. Looking back now, I wish I'd listened more carefully to that quiet discomfort in Jessica's voice. The first year of marriage to Diane was genuinely good. She moved into the house in West Vancouver that Margaret and I had bought 30 years earlier. I'd worried it might be uncomfortable for her, living in another woman's space, but Diane had insisted she wanted to honor my history with Margaret. She'd suggested we redecorate together, keeping some of Margaret's touches while making the space ours. It felt like the right balance. Diane's work as a financial consultant meant irregular hours, sometimes evening meetings with clients, occasional weekend seminars. I didn't mind. I'd spent enough decades in my own demanding career to understand professional obligations. When she'd come home late, we'd have a nightcap together on the deck overlooking the water, and she'd tell me about her day. About 18 months into our marriage, I started having trouble sleeping. Nothing dramatic at first, just waking up at 3 in the morning, unable to fall back asleep, feeling vaguely restless. Then came the digestive issues. My stomach would cramp after meals. I'd feel nauseated for no apparent reason. I chalked it up to getting older, to stress about some investments that weren't performing well. "You should see a doctor," Diane would say, her brow furrowed with concern, as she brought me peppermint tea. I did see my doctor. Dr. Harold Pemberton had been my physician for 20 years. He ran blood work, checked my vitals, asked about my diet and stress levels. Everything came back normal. "Sometimes these things happen as we age, Robert," he told me. "Try to reduce stress, get more exercise, maybe cut back on coffee." I followed his advice. The symptoms would improve for a while, then return. Diane started making me special smoothies in the morning, packed with vitamins and supplements she ordered from some wellness company she'd discovered. "These helped a client of mine who had similar issues," she'd explain. "They tasted terrible, chalky and bitter, despite the fruit she blended in, but I drank them faithfully." Diane was trying to help. That's what I believed. The sleep issues got worse. Some nights I'd wake up with my heart racing, drenched in sweat. Other nights I'd have vivid, disturbing dreams I couldn't quite remember when I woke. I'd find myself confused sometimes, forgetting why I'd walked into a room, or losing my train of thought mid-sentence. Maybe early dementia? Diane suggested gently one evening. Your mother had Alzheimer's, didn't she? She was right. My mother had been diagnosed at 72. The thought terrified me. Was I following the same path at 62? Jessica called every Sunday. During one conversation, about 2 years into my marriage to Diane, I mentioned the memory issues. Dad, that doesn't sound like you, she'd said, her voice tight with worry. Are you sure, doctor? Pemberton checked everything? He did a full workup, sweetheart. Sometimes getting old just means dealing with these things. You're 62, not 92. Have you gotten a second opinion? I hadn't. Diane had been so attentive, so supportive. She'd started coming with me to doctor appointments, keeping detailed notes about my symptoms, asking questions I wouldn't have thought to ask. It felt wrong to doubt her judgment, to seek additional opinions when she was working so hard to help me. The dental appointment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in October. Diane had been complaining about tooth sensitivity for a few weeks. I'd made her an appointment with Dr. Rebecca Foster, a dentist whose practice was in a modern building downtown. I'd gone along because Diane had asked me to. I get anxious at the dentist, she'd admitted. Would you mind waiting with me? Of course I'd agreed. That's what partners do. The appointment started routinely enough. Dr. Foster was in her early 40s, professionally warm, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She examined Diane's teeth, asked questions about where she was experiencing sensitivity, then ordered a full set of x-rays. I sat in the waiting room, scrolling through news on my phone. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The dental assistant came out and asked if I could come back to speak with Dr. Foster. Something in her expression made my chest tighten. Dr. Foster met me in the hallway outside the x-ray room. Diane wasn't with her. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you some questions about your wife's medical history, she said quietly. Is something wrong with her teeth? Has Diane experienced any significant injuries in the past several years? Falls? Accidents? Anything that might have caused bone trauma? The questions seemed to come from nowhere. Not that I know of. Why? Dr. Foster gestured toward her office. Could we speak privately for a moment? My mind raced through possibilities as we walked. Bone cancer? Osteoporosis? She led me into her office, closed the door, and pulled up images on her computer screen. These are your wife's dental x-rays, she said. But when we take x-rays of the jaw, we also capture images of the surrounding skull structure. Mr. Chen, I need you to look at this. She pointed to several areas on the screen. To my untrained eye, they looked like shadowy variations in bone density. These are healed fractures, Dr. Foster explained. This one in the jaw is relatively recent, maybe 6 to 8 months old. But these others in the cheekbone, here in the orbital socket, this one at the base of the skull, these are older. Different stages of healing, which means different incidents. My mouth went dry. Fractures? Diane never mentioned breaking any bones. She would have told me. Dr. Foster's expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Chen, the pattern I'm seeing raises concerns. Multiple facial and skull fractures at different stages of healing can indicate ongoing physical abuse. I'm required by law to... Abuse? The word came out too loud. No, you don't understand. Our marriage is fine. Diane has never mentioned anything like this. Could it be from before we met? The jaw fracture is recent. Within the past year. She paused. Mr. Chen, I need to ask directly. Have you ever struck your wife? The question hit me like a physical blow. No, never. I would never. My hands were shaking. There must be some mistake. I don't believe there's a mistake in what I'm seeing on these x-rays. Dr. Foster's voice was gentle but firm. Given the pattern and the timeline, I'm obligated to report this. But I wanted to speak with you first. Sometimes there are explanations. Can I see my wife? She's with our clinic manager right now. Mr. Chen, I need to ask, has your wife had any other injuries you're aware of? Any emergency room visits? I tried to think clearly through the fog of shock. She sprained her wrist about a year ago. Said she slipped on some ice. And she had a bad fall down some stairs at a client's office maybe. 8 months ago? Bruised her ribs? But those were accidents. Dr. Foster was quiet for a moment. How many accidents has she had since you've been together? I started counting in my head. The wrist, the stairs. She'd fallen getting out of the shower once, hit her shoulder on the tub. There was that time she'd tripped while hiking and landed hard on her side. Another time she'd bumped her head on a kitchen cabinet door she'd left open. As I listed them, I watched Dr. Foster's expression grow more concerned. Mr. Chen, that's 6 significant injuries in less than 3 years. Have any of these resulted in insurance claims? I don't know. Diane handles most of our paperwork. She's better at that sort of thing than I am. The room felt too small suddenly. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything definitive, but I am required to document what I've found. With your permission, I'd like to request copies of your wife's medical records from her primary care physician. If there's a pattern of injuries that weren't properly investigated, that's when something clicked in my memory. Wait, Diane changed doctors about a year ago. Said her old doctor in Toronto had retired, and she wanted someone new here. She sees, I can't remember the name, someone in Burnaby, I think. Dr. Foster nodded slowly. It would help if we could get those records. Mr. Chen, I know this is overwhelming, but if your wife is experiencing some kind of medical condition that's causing frequent injuries, bone density issues, neurological problems affecting balance, we need to identify it. And if she hesitated, if there's something else happening, we need to address that too. Something else, like what? She chose her words carefully. Sometimes patterns of injuries can indicate insurance fraud. Sometimes they indicate domestic violence. Sometimes there are legitimate medical explanations. I can't make assumptions, but what I can say is that this pattern warrants investigation. I felt like I was falling. The woman I'd shared my bed with for 7 years, who made me special smoothies every morning, who held my hand during my frightening symptoms, she was having accidents I hadn't taken seriously. Or was this stranger in a white coat suggesting something even darker? I want to see Diane, I said. When I walked into the consultation room where Diane was waiting with the clinic manager, her face was composed but pale. Robert, what's going on? Why was I kept waiting so long? The clinic manager, a severe-looking woman named Patricia, stood. Mrs. Chen, Dr. Foster has identified some concerns based on your x-rays. We need to ask you some questions about your injury history. What followed was one of the most surreal hours of my life. Diane, with apparent confusion and some irritation, confirmed each of the accidents I'd mentioned. Yes, she'd slipped on ice. Yes, she'd fallen downstairs. Yes, there had been a few other minor incidents. She became defensive when Patricia pressed for details. I'm a bit clumsy. Is that a crime? Diane snapped. I don't see what this has to do with my dental sensitivity. Dr. Foster, who joined us, spoke calmly. Mrs. Chen, the pattern of fractures I'm seeing suggests impacts that would typically require emergency medical care. Can you tell me which hospital or urgent care facilities treated you for these injuries? Diane's jaw tightened. I didn't go to the hospital for most of them. They were minor. A fractured orbital socket and a skull fracture aren't minor, Dr. Foster said quietly. I don't recall having either of those things. The conversation spiraled. Diane accused Dr. Foster of misreading the x-rays. She accused me of betraying her privacy by discussing her medical information. She demanded we leave. Throughout it all, I watched my wife's face and tried to reconcile it with the x-rays I'd seen, with the implications Dr. Foster was dancing around. We left the dental office in tense silence. In the car, Diane was furious. I can't believe you let that woman interrogate me like that. Those x-rays could show anything. Maybe I have some kind of bone condition I don't know about. But to suggest to imply, what exactly was she implying? I asked quietly. Diane's hands clenched in her lap. You heard her. Either that I'm lying about accidents for insurance money or that you're beating me. Both are insane. She said there might be a medical explanation. Then I'll see a specialist. But I'm not going back to that dentist. She's clearly incompetent. I wanted to believe my wife. I wanted to dismiss Dr. Foster's concerns as professional overcaution, but something nagged at me. That night, while Diane was in the shower, I did something I'd never done before. I went through her office. Diane's home office was her private space. I'd always respected that boundary, but I needed to understand. I found her file cabinet unlocked and started pulling folders. Insurance paperwork, medical bills, And then I found something that made my blood run cold. There were hospital discharge papers I'd never seen before. 3 separate visits to emergency rooms in the past 2 years. 1 in Vancouver, 2 in Burnaby. Each time she'd gone alone. Each time she'd been treated for injuries she'd never mentioned to me. A dislocated shoulder, fractured ribs, a concussion. According to the dates, these had happened when she'd told me she was at evening client meetings or weekend seminars. Under those papers, I found insurance claims. Not from our shared policy, but from a personal accident insurance policy I didn't know she had. Claims totaling over $200,000 across the 2 years. Each claim was for a different injury. Each claim had been paid. I sat at her desk, papers spread around me, trying to make sense of it. Why would Diane hide injuries from me? Why would she have a separate insurance policy? And then a darker thought crept in. Were these injuries even real, or was this fraud? I heard the shower turn off upstairs. My hands were shaking as I took photos of the documents with my phone, then carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. When Diane came downstairs in her bathrobe, I was sitting in the living room pretending to read. "Are you still upset about today?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Just processing," I said. She sat beside me, took my hand. "Robert, I know this seems strange, but I promise you, there's nothing sinister going on. I'm just accident-prone. I didn't tell you about some of the injuries because I didn't want you to worry, especially with your health issues." "You didn't want me to worry? You've had so much on your plate. The sleep problems, the stomach issues. I didn't want to add to your stress." Her eyes were earnest, concerned, the same eyes that had made me feel seen at that fundraiser 8 years ago. "I love you. You know that, right?" I wanted to believe her. But the papers I'd photographed burned in my mind like evidence of something I couldn't yet name. That night, after Diane fell asleep, I sat in the dark living room and made a phone call to my daughter. "Dad, it's almost midnight. Are you okay?" I told Jessica everything. The dental appointment, the x-rays, what I'd found in Diane's office. She was silent for a long moment. "Dad, this doesn't sound right. None of it sounds right. I know. Those smoothies she makes you, your symptoms." "Dad, when did all that start?" I thought back. Maybe 18 months ago? Around the time she sprained her wrist. Around the time she started having accidents that generated insurance claims? The implication hung between us like poison gas. "Jessica, you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything yet. But Dad, I think you need to see a different doctor. Not Dr. Pemberton, someone Diane doesn't know about. And I think you need to stop drinking those smoothies." "You think she's poisoning me?" The words sounded absurd even as I said them. "I think you've been getting sicker while she's been having mysterious accidents that pay out insurance money. Dad, please, just humor me. See another doctor. Get blood work done. And don't tell Diane." I agreed because the fear in my daughter's voice mirrored the fear I'd been suppressing all evening. The next morning, I poured my smoothie down the sink when Diane wasn't looking. I told her I wasn't feeling well enough to eat. She'd frowned with concern, felt my forehead, suggested I rest. Over the next 3 days, I dumped every smoothie she made, and something remarkable happened. My head started to clear. The fog that had been clouding my thoughts for months began to lift. My stomach stopped cramping. I still felt weak, exhausted, but different, clearer. On the 4th day, while Diane was at what she said was a client meeting, I went to a walk-in clinic in North Vancouver, far from our usual neighborhood. I told the doctor everything, my symptoms, how long they'd lasted, my sudden improvement after stopping the smoothies. I expected skepticism, but Dr. Sarah Martinez listened carefully. "Mr. Chen, I'd like to run a comprehensive toxicology screen," she said. "If someone has been gradually introducing a toxic substance to your system, it might still show up in your blood, hair, or urine, even if you've stopped ingesting it recently." She took samples, promised to put a rush on the results. "If this shows what I suspect it might, we'll need to involve the police," she added. "Are you prepared for that?" Was I prepared to discover that my wife had been poisoning me? No. But I was prepared to know the truth. I called Jessica on my way home. "I did what you said. We'll have results in a few days. Where are you going to stay until then?" "Dad, if she's really... I'll be careful. I won't eat or drink anything she gives me. That's not enough." What if she realizes you've stopped? What if she escalates? Her fear was contagious. I'll figure something out. But I didn't have a plan. I came home to find Diane in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She smiled when she saw me. "How are you feeling?" "You look better than you have in days." "A bit better," I admitted. "Good. I'm making your favorite salmon with that maple glaze you love." She'd already set the table, poured wine. Everything looked normal, loving, exactly like the life I thought we'd built together. I couldn't eat that dinner. I pushed food around my plate, claimed my stomach was still unsettled. Diane's expression flickered with something frustration, concern, before smoothing back to sympathy. "Why don't you go rest?" she suggested. "I'll clean up." In bed that night, with Diane sleeping beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how I'd gotten here. How do you look at someone you've shared your life with and wonder if they've been trying to kill you? My phone buzzed silently on the nightstand. A text from Jessica, called Dr. Foster's office. She filed a report with Adult Protective Services and shared the x-rays with a forensic consultant. "Dad, they think the injury pattern is consistent with self-inflicted trauma for insurance fraud. They want to talk to you." My hands went numb. Self-inflicted. Diane had been hurting herself deliberately to collect insurance money. And if that was true, what did it mean about what she was doing to me? I couldn't stay in that bed. I got up as quietly as I could and went downstairs. In the study, I started searching online for what kinds of poisons could cause my symptoms. Arsenic came up repeatedly, thallium, antifreeze. All of them would cause the gastrointestinal distress, the cognitive confusion, the weakness I'd been experiencing. I heard movement upstairs. Diane was awake. I closed the laptop quickly, but not before she appeared in the doorway, backlit by the hall light. "Robert? What are you doing up?" "Couldn't sleep." She moved into the room, her silk nightgown whispering against her legs. "You've been acting strange since that dental appointment. Are you upset with me?" "Should I be?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of question is that? Why didn't you tell me about the hospital visits, the emergency rooms, the injuries I knew nothing about?" She froze. For just a moment, I saw her calculate, then her expression softened into hurt. "You went through my papers. Why didn't you tell me?" "I told you. I didn't want to worry you." "Robert, you've been so fragile." "Fragile?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "I've been sick." "There's a difference." "Is there?" "You've been falling apart for months. Memory issues, confusion, weakness. I've been holding this household together while you deteriorate, and you're interrogating me about some accidents I had?" The way she said deteriorate made my skin crawl. "What's in the smoothies, Diane?" Her face went blank. "Vitamins, protein powder, fruit. You've watched me make them 100 times. What's really in them? You've lost your mind." She turned to leave. "I'm calling Dr. Pemberton in the morning. Maybe he can refer you to a neurologist because this paranoia isn't normal. Don't walk away from me." She spun back. "Don't tell me what to do in my own home." "Your home?" This was Margaret's home. The mask cracked. For just a second, I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by tears. "How dare you? After everything I've done for you, after everything I've put up with your endless health complaints, your daughter's suspicion, living in another woman's shadow, I should have known you'd never really let me be your wife." She was good. If I hadn't seen those insurance claims, hadn't talked to Dr. Foster, hadn't stopped drinking the smoothies and felt my head clear, I might have believed her. I might have apologized. Instead, I said, "I'm moving into the guest room until I figure some things out." Her tears stopped like a faucet turning off. "Fine. Maybe that's for the best." I didn't sleep that night. I listened to her move around the house, heard her on the phone speaking in low tones to someone. At one point, I heard her in the kitchen for a long time. When morning came, I waited until she left for what she said was an early client breakfast. Then I called Dr. Martinez. "Your results came back," she said without preamble. "Mr. Chen, you have elevated levels of thallium in your system, not acutely toxic, but consistent with chronic low-dose exposure over an extended period. I've already contacted the police. They want to speak with you immediately." Thallium. I looked it up while still on the phone. A toxic heavy metal once used in rat poison, causes exactly the symptoms I'd been experiencing. Nearly tasteless, fatal in high doses, debilitating in low doses. And according to what I was reading, if I'd continued ingesting it for a few more months, it would have killed me. The police arrived at my house within an hour. 2 detectives. One a woman in her 40s named Detective Sarah Walsh. The other a younger man named Detective Mike Torres. I showed them everything. The insurance documents, the medical records I'd photographed, the emails I'd found on the shared computer after Diane left that morning, emails to someone named Marcus about the plan and keeping the old man confused. "Who's Marcus?" Detective Walsh asked. "I have no idea. I've never heard her mention anyone by that name." They took my laptop, took the documents, took samples from the vitamin containers in the kitchen. Detective Torres found the blender Diane used for the smoothies and bagged it as evidence. "Mr. Chen, is there somewhere else you can stay?" Detective Walsh asked. "If your wife has been deliberately poisoning you, it's not safe for you to be here when she returns." I called Jessica. Within 3 hours, she'd booked a flight from Calgary. Within 6 hours, I was checked into a hotel downtown, with a police officer stationed outside my door. The investigation moved faster than I'd imagined possible. The vitamin powder in the containers Diane used wasn't vitamins, it was contaminated with thallium sulfate. The emails on our computer revealed she'd been communicating with Marcus Hendricks, a former colleague from Toronto, about insurance fraud schemes. Further investigation revealed that Diane Ashford wasn't even her real name. Her real name was Diane Hartwell. She changed it legally 7 years ago, right before moving to Vancouver. Before that, she'd been married 3 times. All 3 previous husbands had died. The first 2 deaths had been ruled accidental, one a fall downstairs, one a drowning. The third husband, Marcus Hendricks's father, had died of what was determined to be acute renal failure, but no autopsy had been performed because he'd had a history of kidney disease. Detective Walsh walked me through all of this in the hotel room, 3 days after I'd left my house. Jessica sat beside me, holding my hand. "Marcus is her stepson?" I asked. "Her former stepson. He was 19 when his father died. Diane was the beneficiary of $1 million life insurance policy. 3 years later, she started the pattern of self-inflicted injuries and insurance claims. Marcus was helping her stage the injuries, file the claims, split the proceeds. Why target me? You were financially stable, recently widowed, lonely. You owned your home outright. She took out a life insurance policy on you without your knowledge, forged your signature. $2 million with her as the sole beneficiary. My mind reeled. How did she forge my signature without me knowing? She used documents you'd signed, legitimately your marriage certificate, your will. Digital manipulation software did the rest." Detective Walsh's expression was grim. "Mr. Chen, based on the level of thallium in your system and the timeline Dr. Martinez established, if you'd continued drinking those smoothies for another 2 or 3 months, you would have died. It would have looked like natural causes, organ failure, possibly attributed to dementia complications. No one would have questioned it, given your age and your documented health decline." Jessica made a sound like a wounded animal. I couldn't speak. "We arrested Diane and Marcus this morning," Detective Walsh continued. "She's being charged with attempted murder, fraud, identity fraud, and we're seeking to reopen investigations into her previous husband's deaths. Marcus is being charged as an accessory." "What happens now?" I managed to ask. "Now you heal, and eventually there will be a trial." The trial happened 9 months later. By then, I'd recovered most of my physical health. The cognitive effects took longer sometimes. I still lost words, still had moments of confusion. The doctor said some of it might be permanent damage from the thallium exposure. The emotional recovery was harder still. Jessica moved back to Vancouver to be near me. She'd taken a leave from her job in Calgary. Wouldn't let me argue about it. "You spent my whole childhood taking care of me, Dad. Let me return the favor." I sat through every day of the trial. Diane looked different in the courtroom, harder somehow, her elegant facade stripped away. Marcus testified against her in exchange for a plea deal, describing in clinical detail how they'd researched poisons, how Diane had been methodically increasing the thallium doses in my smoothies, how they'd planned to wait just long enough after my death, before accessing the insurance money to avoid suspicion. The prosecution brought in a forensic toxicologist who explained to the jury how thallium poisoning works, how it mimics the symptoms of natural aging and cognitive decline, how difficult it is to detect unless you're specifically looking for it. Dr. Foster testified about the X-rays, about the pattern of injuries, Investigators testified about the fraudulent insurance claims totaling nearly $400,000 across 3 years. The defense tried to paint Diane as a woman with mental health issues, as someone who'd been manipulated by Marcus. It didn't work. The jury saw what I'd been blind to: a calculating, methodical predator who'd built a career out of exploiting vulnerable people. When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, I felt no triumph, only exhaustion and a deep, abiding sadness for the 7 years I'd wasted, for the way I'd ignored my daughter's concerns, for how close I'd come to never knowing the truth. The judge sentenced Diane to 25 years in prison. Marcus got 7 years. As they led her away, Diane looked back at me once. There was no remorse in her eyes, only cold calculation. Even then, outside the courthouse, Jessica hugged me tightly. "It's over, Dad." But it wasn't over. Not really. I had to learn how to trust again, how to eat without wondering if my food was poisoned, how to open myself up to human connection without suspicion. I sold the house in West Vancouver. Too many ghosts, both literal and metaphorical. Jessica and I found a smaller place in Kitsilano, close to the beach. I started therapy. Slowly, painfully, I began to put my life back together. A year after the trial, I was having coffee with a support group for victims of financial fraud and relationship abuse. There were 7 of us, all older adults who'd been targeted by people we'd trusted. Hearing their stories, telling mine, helped. One woman, Patricia, was 72. Her nephew had stolen her retirement savings. Another man, George, had been scammed by a supposed investment advisor who turned out to be running a Ponzi scheme. "How do you learn to trust again?" Patricia asked the group one evening. No one had a good answer. Trust isn't something you can force. It grows slowly, carefully, with time and evidence. I'm still learning. What I have learned, what I try to share with others in similar situations, are the warning signs I missed. The isolation, how Diane had subtly discouraged me from spending time with old friends, how she'd positioned herself as my primary support system, the financial control, how she'd taken over all our paperwork, all our accounts, the gaslighting, how she'd made me doubt my own perception of reality when I started having symptoms, the love bombing, how attentive and caring she'd been, especially at the beginning and whenever I'd shown signs of suspicion. I learned that predators like Diane target people in transition, widowed, divorced, recently retired. They look for loneliness and financial stability. They're patient. They build trust slowly and methodically, and they're often breathtakingly good at appearing normal, even loving. I also learned that listening to people who love you, really listening, can save your life. Jessica's concerns, which I dismissed as overprotectiveness, turned out to be the warning system I needed. If I'd paid attention earlier, I might have saved myself months of suffering. Now, at 64, I'm rebuilding. Some days are harder than others. I still have nightmares sometimes about drinking those smoothies, about the fog descending over my mind, about how close I came to never waking up. But I'm alive, I'm here, and I'm learning that survival itself is its own kind of victory. Jessica is back in Calgary now, thriving in her career, but we talk every day. She still worries, probably always will. I let her. That's what people who love you do, they worry. And sometimes, that worry is the lifeline that saves you. If there's anything I want others to take from my story, it's this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't dismiss concerns from people who care about you. Don't let isolation or loneliness make you vulnerable to those who would exploit it. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're being systematically weakened, confused, or controlled, reach out for help. There's no shame in it. There's only survival. The human capacity for evil still stuns me sometimes. But equally stunning is the human capacity for recovery, for resilience, for finding light even in the darkest chapters. I'm finding my light again, slowly. And if an old civil engineer can survive attempted murder and come out the other side, anyone can. The sunset over English Bay tonight was beautiful orange and pink, spreading across the water like hope itself. I sat on the beach and watched it, grateful for every moment I almost didn't have. That's the gift that comes from surviving something that was meant to kill you. Every ordinary moment becomes extraordinary. Every breath becomes a small rebellion against those who tried to silence you. I'm still here, and that, in the end, is enough.